Brachos Daf Beis, the first daf in Shas, consists of a Mishnah, which discusses primarily one halacha, the correct time for Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis, and the Gemara, which has two parts to it. The first part consists of three challenges to the linguistic style of the Mishnah, and the second part of the Gemara brings brachos which say halachos that differ to the Mishnah. Let us begin. The Mishnah has two halachos about Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis. One is the earliest one can say it, and one is the latest one can say it. The earliest time to say Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis, the evening Shema, the Mishnah brings no machokes, is from the time that Kohanim, who are tamei during the day, can begin eating truma again. Kohanim need to go to the mikvah, and they need the day to end before they can be declared a tahor and eat truma. What is the time that the day is over and they can eat truma? It's Teisei Kachavim. It's when the stars come out, when the light of the sun has faded significantly enough that the stars are visible, but we call it Teisei Kachavim. Second part, what is the latest one can say Shema? How long during the night can one say Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis? So here the Mishnah brings three opinions. The first opinion is that of Rabbi Eliezer, who says until the end of the first watch of the night is divided into three ashmuras, three watches. So the end of the first watch would be 1/3 of the night. The first third of the night is the correct time for saying Shema. The Chachamim say until midnight, meaning the first half of the night. Rabbi Gamliel says until the crack of dawn, Amud HaShachar, when the first light of the sun begins to appear, meaning the entire night. The rest of the Mishnah is devoted to Rabbi Gamliel explaining his shita. Rabbi Gamliel says that there was an incident that happened in which his son was at a wedding, a simcha, and he didn't get back until late, and he asked his father, I didn't say Shema, can I still say Shema? His father said, you can say Shema as long as dawn has not broken, because any mitzvah where Chachamim said you should say it by chatzos, you can really say it all night. Any mitzvah which has to be fulfilled during the day or until the end of the night has the entire night. Why did the Chachamim say chatzos? In order to keep you away from the edge, so that you make sure to accomplish it on time. Now, Rabbi Gamliel brings two examples of this. He says the burning of the parts of a carbon which are meant to be burnt on the mizbech, which is the chelev in all karbanos, and certain limbs in a karban olah. That needs to be done during the night. It can be done until the crack of dawn, but the Chachamim said to do it by chatzos. And the second example he brings is karbanos which have to be eaten. They can be eaten, again, until the crack of dawn, until the night is over. Now, over here, Rashi points out, the Chachamim never said that you have to do it by chatzos. But it's another example of something where the mitzvah is to do it during the day and the night, and you can do it all throughout the entire night. That is the end of the Mishnah. Let's review the Mishnah quickly as far as what we need to be able to go further. When is the correct time for saying Shema? The Mishnah says everybody agrees it begins by Teisei Kachavim and it ends either the first third of the night, the first half of the night, or it goes throughout the entire night. Now the Gemara begins with three linguistic challenges to the Mishnah. The Gemara always starts analyzing the Mishnah by vetting out the language of the Mishnah to see if there's a problem with it. First linguistic challenge is as follows. Why does the Mishnah started discussing Kriyas Shema at night, and it begins by saying, Shema. When is the correct time for saying Shema? It sounds like we're in the middle of a conversation about Shema, and you said, hey, when's the right time to say Shema? What do you mean? We're in the middle of any discussion. This is the beginning of Shas. The Gemara says, we're coming off the Psukim. The Torah says, B'shach b'cha uvkumecha. I told you when to say Shema. B'shach b'cha means when people are going to sleep. The time, not when people are sleeping, when people are going to sleep. So the Mishnah asks, when are people going to sleep? And therefore we have the three opinions in the Mishnah as to when people are going to sleep. Second linguistic challenge in the Mishnah is why are we discussing the night Shema before the morning Shema? Doesn't the morning come before night? And here the Gemara says the famous halacha, no. In halacha, night comes before morning. The Gemara brings two psukim to support this. One is our pasuk of B'shach b'cha uvkumecha, which you clearly see that the Torah speaks about evening Shema before night Shema. And the second is the more famous one from Brias Ha'olam, V'chayev V'voker Yom Echad. Clearly, Erev comes before Boker, so evening comes before morning, night comes before the day. This Mishnah, when it discusses the brachos that one should say with Shema, talks about the morning Shema, Kriyas Shema Shel Shachris, before Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis. It's out of order there. The Gemara says, well, we're coming off this Mishnah. This Mishnah first discussed evening and then morning. So the Mishnah continues with morning, which is what we were in the middle of, and then it goes back to talking about evening. Now the Gemara moves to the third linguistic challenge on the Mishnah. The Gemara asks, why do you define the earliest time for Shema as when the Kohanim can eat Truma? You mean to say Tzeitzei Kachavim, so just say Tzeitzei Kachavim. The Gemara says, well, we're trying to teach you another halacha agav, that the Kohanim can say Shema as soon as the sun comes down. They don't have to wait till after they bring a carbon. What this is really about is how you read a pasuk which describes the tahara process. The pasuk says, Ubo hashemesh v'toher. When the sun comes down, he becomes a tahar. So you see, you don't have to wait until the carbon is brought, which would have to be in the next morning. You can't bring karbanos at night. As soon as the sun sets and the day ends, he's tahar, and he can eat truma. Says the Gemara, hold on a second, maybe I can interpret that pasuk differently. Maybe it doesn't mean Uba HaShemesh, the sun comes down. Maybe it means Uba HaShemesh, the sun comes back. Its light appears in the morning. And V'taher means you should go and become tahar. Go bring your carbon, and then you can be matahar yourself. The Gemara says that's not the correct way to read it. Rabba Bar Rav Shila says if that was how the pasuk was meant to be understood, it would say V'yitzhar. He can then proceed with his tahara. It doesn't say that. It means to say that the sun comes down and he is tahar now. The Gemara quotes that in Marav and Eretz Yisrael they had a similar discussion, but they didn't know about Rav Shila's. They didn't know about Rabba Bar Rav Shila's diuk from the word v'taher instead of v'yitar. So they weren't sure which way to understand the intent of Uba HaShemesh v'taher. Does it refer to when the sun sets and you tahar now, or does it refer to when the sun rises in the morning and then you can go be makar of your carbon and become tahar after that? The Gemara says they resolved it in a different way. They resolved it because they had another brisa which says, you know what's a good siman for when Kohanim become tahar? When the stars come out. It's about when the stars come out. And we know that we're talking about when the day is ending. We're not talking about when the day is beginning. We now move on to the second half of our Gemara's analysis of the Mishnah for today. The Gemara will quote three brises which give slightly different ways of defining the correct time for saying Shema at night. And the Gemara is going to try to see if it fits together with our Mishnah, these three brises, or if they don't fit at all. So the Gemara begins with the first one, which says that the correct time for saying Shema begins when instead of when Kohanim eat Truma, this one says when a poor person eats his meal. When he sits down to eat his meal, that's the earliest you can say Shema. What's significant about a poor person? Well, he doesn't have candles too much. He doesn't have too much light, so he's got to eat early. What is the latest you can say Shema at night? When this poor person finishes his meal. Says the Gemara, the latest time the poor person finishes his meal, that's definitely much earlier than our Mishnah's three opinions, which were a third, a half of the entire night. So that's for sure machlokas. This brisa does not agree with that. What about the first halacha, when the earliest you can say Shema is? Our Mishnah said when the Kohanim can start eating Truma again after they were mataher. This one says when a poor person starts eating. Do they fit together or not? So the Gemara here claims, yes, that's the same time. The Gemara now continues and brings the second brisa. So this one quotes a machlokas already. Since it's a machlokas, we know that the following two opinions are going to be different times because they're part of a machlokas. The two opinions here are the Chachamim, which say like our Mishnah, from when Kohanim can eat, and Rabbi Meir, who says no, it's when most people sit down to eat their meal on Shabbos. Shabbos, you don't have to go home and cook. When you leave shul, the meal's already ready, so you can sit down and eat right away. So that time is definitely different than our Mishnah's time, which is the Chachamim in this brisa, which is when Kohanim can eat. The Gemara says we assume that the time that most people eat on Shabbos and the time that the poor person eats are both around the same time, both the beginning of the evening. Now, since we've proven that the time that Kohanim eat has to be different than the time that most people eat on Shabbos, because in the second brisa it's a machlokes, those two opinions, therefore the time that Kohanim eat must also be different than the time that poor people eat, which we're assuming is the same time as the time that most people eat on Shabbos, which is different than what we said a minute ago where we tried to fit those two times together. So the Gemara, no. I'll really tell you that poor people and most people on Shabbos eat at different times. And the time that poor people eat is the same as the time that Kohanim can eat, which is Tzeitzei Kachavim. The odd one out of these three is going to be this Shita of Rabbi Meir and this Brisa, which is the time that most people eat on Shabbos. That would be a different time. The Gemara doesn't specify if it's earlier or if it's later. Now the Gemara discusses another line in this brisa. So the brisa said a similar davar for you to know when the correct time is Teisek Chachamim, when you see 3 stars out. Then the Gemara says we don't have a proof to Teisek Chachamim, but we do have an indication from a pasuk. The Gemara brings from Sefer Nehemiah, where it says as follows: we did work. Some people were holding spears. From Alos Shachar, from dawn until the stars come out. So you see, we're defining the work week, the work day, as being from Alos Shachar until the stars come out. So you see, the work day ends, meaning the day ends when stars come out. Says the Gemara, I can also bring another pasuk here, which is the next pasuk in Sefer Nehemiah, which is Gam ba'isi amarti la'am ish v'nara yalinu b'sech Yerushalayim v'haylanu halayla mishmar v'hayom malacha. The night was for watching, the day was for working. Says the Gemara, what does this second pasuk add? The first pasuk told me that when the stars come out is the end of the workday. Says the Gemara, yeah, if you just had that pasuk, you might think that we're talking about people here who were beginning to work before the day starts and ending their work after the day ends. That's why they went until the stars came out. That's really way after the day is over. They worked into the night. Says the Gemara, no, but in the second pasuk, the Torah says v'hayom malacha. It calls the work day the day. So you see, this is the halachic definition of a day, not just what these people worked. Now the Gemara continues and brings the third brisa. This brisa has a lot of opinions as to when the earliest time for saying Shema at night is, and they are as follows. First of all, the Gemara says we have the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, which says it's from when Shabbos begins on Friday evening. Rabbi Shua says it's from the time that Kohanim are allowed to eat Truma, like we had in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir says from the time that the Kohanim go to the mikvah. This Rabbi Meir is different than the Rabbi Meir we had before. The Gemara will ask. The Gemara says Rabbi Huda challenged Rabbi Meir, how can you say that the time when you can start saying Shema is when Kohanim go to the mikvah? Kohanim have to go to the mikvah during the day because they have to already be out of the mikvah by the time the sun comes down. The Gemara will say what Rabbi Meir's response to that is. Then the Gemara says Rabbi Chanina says it's from the time that the poor person begins to eat. Rav Chai or maybe Rav Achla says it's the time that most people sit down to eat. Here the Gemara doesn't mention Shabbos. Now, in our discussion of the second brisa, we had said that Kohanim and Aniyim eat at the same time, and therefore there was no contradiction between our Mishnah and the brisa. But here, those two opinions are brought differently. They're said by different Mandei Amrim. Says the Gemara, that proves that they are different opinions. They are not the same time, they are different times. Which one is later, the Gemara says? The Gemara says, well, I would assume that this brisa is listed in chronological order, otherwise there wouldn't be differing opinions here. So the later one is when the poor person eats. That's later than when Kohanim eat. Now the Gemara goes to the conversation between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Meir had said that the correct time when you can start saying Shema is when Kohanim go to the mikvah. Rabbi Huda said that that's during the day. So the Gemara says, what is Rabbi Meir going to answer? So before we understand Rabbi Meir's answer, we have to check the background information about something called Bein Hashmashos. Bein Hashmashos is twilight. You see, the sun sets long before the light disappears from the sky. The sun sets, it's still very bright outside. Then light begins fading from the sky all the way until the stars come out and the light is pretty much gone. Sometime during that period, right before the night begins, is what's called Bein Hashmashos. It's officially Safek Yom and Safek Laila. It's Machlokes what Bein Hashmashos is. Rabbi Yossi says Bein Hashmashos is a blink of an eye just before nightfall, just before the stars come out. Rabbi Yehuda has a different opinion. He says that the Bein Hashmashos period extends for 9 minutes, approximately half a mil's walking time, before Teisek Kohanim. So now says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda challenged Rabbi Meir. He said, how could you say that the earliest time for Shema is when Kohanim go to the mikvah during the day? Because they have to be out of the mikvah before Teisek Kohanim in order for their tahara to occur. Says the Gemara, well, you think I'm talking about Bein Hashmashos according to the way you defined it, meaning they have to be out of the mikvah at least 9 minutes before Teisek Kohanim, so that's far away from Teisek Kohanim? it's far before the end of the day, no. I hold like Rabbi Yossi. I hold that Banish Moshe is a blink of an eye. They can come out of the mikvah, blink of an eye before the night falls, and they'll still be safely during the day. And as soon as night falls, as soon as it's a even if it's just blink of an eye later, they can eat truma. And therefore, it's not distant into the day. You can already say shema from then. Now, the Gemara addresses contradictions between these opinions that we've seen. We've seen that Rabbi Meir contradicts Rabbi Meir. In the first brayso, Rabbi Meir said that the earliest time for Shema is when most people sit down and eat. And in the second brayso, he said that it's from the time that Kohanim go out to the mikvah. The Gemara says it's two different Tanaim who learned differently from Rabbi Meir. Now the Gemara has another contradiction. Rabbi Eliezer against Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer in this brayso here said it's from the time that you would have to start keeping Shabbos on Friday evening. Now in our Mishnah, which started the Masechta, Rabbi Eliezer was one of the three opinions which were discussing the time when Shema saying is over. That would seem to indicate that Rabbi Eliezer agrees with the first statement in the Mishnah, which is that the earliest time for saying Shema is when Kohanim can start eating Truma. Therefore we have a contradiction. Our Mishnah seems to indicate that Rabbi Eliezer holds that the earliest time for saying Shema in the evening is when Kohanim start eating Truma. And in this brayso he says it's from when you have to keep Shabbos. The Gemara offers two answers. Number one, it's a machlokes tanaim what Rabbi Eliezer really said. Or number two, Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah never meant to say anything about when the time for Shema at night begins. He was only weighing in on from when the time for Shema ends. He didn't agree with what our Mishnah said about when the time for Shema begins. He had a different opinion. His opinion is just as he says here in the brayso. It's from when you would have to start keeping Shabbos on Friday evening or Yom Tov evening.